Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to episode 17 of the ESG show. And today we are talking about ESG from an African perspective. And I thought I would start with a clip from a video. This is a video featuring the controversial Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson interviewing Maguette Wade, an entrepreneur originally from Senegal, who's an advocate of what she calls African dignity. Just bear with us while we call the video up. Okay, well, the video will be up in just a second. We've had a week break and we've got a technical problem. Oh, here we go. Here we are.
It's astounding! Time is sprinting!
Your whole thing about the climate change. Oh, gee, climate change. I'm not even going to go and argue the scientific argument. I'm not. Your solution right now is to tell me we stop all carbon emission, we stop all fossil fuels right now. Right now. But Jordan, what does that mean if we did that? What does that mean if we did that? It means
poor people will freeze in the dark and bake in the sun while they starve.
Thank you. You just signed a death warrant for 1.3 billion people, of them 1 billion Black people. And you just told me that Black Lives Matter. So even when it comes to climate, you're full of it.
Okay, so sorry about the technical issues we had there, and an advert for the Rocky Horror Show, which was unexpected, not something we were expecting to see. But I thought that was a very interesting clip there. And I want to touch on the topic of what was said there in today's show. And I know that there is a view that climate change is a scam invented to keep poor countries poor. That the developed world got rich burning fossil fuels with abandon, and now it is the turn of the rest of the world. We in the West come up with a new wheeze to maintain the status quo. I can only speak for myself, but I want the emerging world to keep developing, setting aside the humanity reasons for another reason, which I know most economists agree with. The Western world will become richer if Africa became richer, because this creates a massive trading opportunity. If a billion or so new wealthy consumers emerged, then for Western companies ranging from Apple to Unilever, this is good news. So I don't agree that we in the West want the poor parts of the world to stay poor, although I would acknowledge that there are some people who do think that way. And also there is such a thing as sort of post-colonial guilt. Yes, if Africa got rich, it would appease at least some people's conscience. Anyway, furthermore, climate change is clearly not a scam. I think that is obvious to any objective person, without being rude. Any objective person with half a brain can see that climate change is not a scam. But I have another argument. And this is why I disagree so strongly with Maguette Wade and also by Jordan Peterson, and why, and that's indeed anyone who is cynical about fighting climate change. And that is that climate change is also an opportunity, because it is forcing us down a path that actually create much more wealth than if climate change wasn't a thing. Renewables are a fantastic opportunity. The cost of energy generated by renewables is falling exponentially. And this is fabulously good news, which needs shouting from the highest rooftops. Anyway, I think that one of the reasons why the more enthusiastic advocates of free markets don't agree with what I just said about renewables is because they think that if renewables are so good, they would happen anyway. What's that got to do with climate change? And I think that's a naive view. I too believe in free markets and capitalism, but also can see that they're not perfect. Free markets lack vision. I won't go into detail here about this, but if you want more, there's a very good book by Eric Beinhocker, The Origin of Wealth. take a look at that, and especially have a look at what he says about fitness landscapes. And I think he explains beautifully why it is that actually the free markets do lack vision, and why it has required something like climate change to force us down a route which ultimately would be better for us anyway. Now, I also think that for Africa, renewables are a particular opportunity. For one thing, they solve the problem of providing electricity to remote areas without the need for connectivity to a national grid. But there's another opportunity. Bear with me while I explain this. First of all, Africa is sunny. Everyone knows this. The amount of sunshine in Africa creates an opportunity for solar. So far, pretty obvious. But what I discovered recently is that Africa, especially the region which I guess you would call Central Africa, is extremely windy. A report from IRENA, I-R-E-N-A, published a chart. There's the report, and the chart should be appearing in just a second. And that shows the windiest parts of the world. And there seems to me pretty clearly that sort of Central Africa to Southern Africa region is probably just about the windiest region in the world. So what do you get when you have both a lot of wind and a lot of sun? Answer: optimal conditions for renewables. And this takes me to the opportunity. Certain industries will probably never work directly from wind and solar. For example, steel and ammonia production. The only way these industries will be able to function in a way that has zero or minimal carbon footprint is via green hydrogen. But here is the rub. Hydrogen is extremely expensive to transport. This means it will be more cost effective to transport the products of hydrogen, such as green steel, than hydrogen itself. Now let's just remind you, refer you back to that report from IRENA. They also produce another chart, which I think is very interesting. This chart will appear on the screen in just a second, as if by magic. And this shows the regions of the world with the maximum potential for generating hydrogen. And sure enough, look at the region that's number one. Yes, it's precisely that area in Africa that I was talking about just now. And for this reason, I think Africa has an opportunity to move beyond being the world's center for raw materials, with all the negative connotations that means, and the center of the world's future industry. Anyway, that is enough from me. Let's welcome today's guests. And today on the show, we have Abbas Agbaji. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Abbas.
Yes, thank you, Michael. That's Abbas Agbaji. Thank you.
Well, hello and welcome to the show. I hope you're well today.
Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. So Abbas is an ESG and impact professional with over 10 years of experience supporting the integration of environmental and social lens in investment advisory and operations for multi-million-dollar projects across sub-Sahara Africa. Prior to founding his consultancy outfit, Impact Crest Consulting, he was Vice President ESG and Social Impact at Karamo Capital Limited and the Pioneer ESG and Impact Manager at InfraCredit, Nigeria. He is currently the adjunct technical anchor of the Sustainability Policy Commission at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, a foremost think tank in Nigeria and leading private sector dialogue with the Nigerian government. So whereabouts are you right now then, Abbas?
I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria.
In Lagos. Well, welcome to the show. What are your thoughts about what Maget Wade said just now about this sort of, climate change is, I don't think she said it was a scam, but very sort of cynical about it. Is that a common view held in Africa? And what's your view?
Well, I think it's one of the dominant views, and everyone has a right to their own opinions because we cannot always see situations the same way. But I do think that, given some geopolitics, angle to it, some people would rather think in that way. But for so many people, particularly people who have observed some of the very telling impact of climate change, across the continent and elsewhere in other parts of the world, these people would rather think that, of course, the developed economies do have a role to support African countries in their transition, agenda. But this transition is not meant to be abrupt. It's not meant to be sudden. It's meant to be a long-term approach. It means things are going to go on gradually. It's a gradual shift. When we look at the nationally determined contributions of each country, you would see that it's within a timeline, and therefore no one would expect that the world is just going to change without some adequate measures to mitigate adverse impact on people. So I do think that Jordan Peterson and Margaret have actually viewed things in a more, heightened sense, rather than in a more pragmatic approach, given that, leaders across the world would, of course, think around what many people have termed as climate justice, such that people should not, sacrifice their well-being in the course of, making the transition. But of course, we all know that if we don't make these changes, climate change does not respect any geography. It doesn't matter who contributed the most GHG emissions. Everyone will be impacted wherever you are, anytime, any day. And this is the challenge that we must all come together to solve, despite some of the skeptics around. I do believe that there are merits to their conversation, in the sense that developed countries need to come up, to deliver on the pledges they make in terms of climate finance. But it would be just pushing the envelope to say that what is expected is an abrupt, sudden changes. That is not the case. It is a long-term approach that should support the well-being of people.
Okay, thank you for that, Abbas. So I think probably when she says it's not realistic to ask African countries to stop emitting carbon dioxide right now, I don't think anyone's actually asking African companies to do that, are they? I think that's probably pretty much just supports what you just said. We just had a comment, by the way, from Zahanga Alam. Let's not play with Africa as we did the last 150 years with other resources. Let's make Africa regenerative, as this is the last mass resource area we have left. Well, who can argue with that, I suppose? I don't think anyone can argue with that, can they? And also on the show today, we have Nina Nachimba. Hello, Nina.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everyone.
Hi. How are you?
I am okay.
Good. So, Nina, if you just bear with me for a second, just got thrown a bit by the delay there. Nina is a lawyer, a sustainability consultant, and ESG risk management and expert. As a senior officer at Stanbic Bank Uganda, she provides crucial legal guidance to the credit and business units, enhancing the bank's operations. Nina is deeply committed to sustainability and ESG practices for multinational corporations. During her tenure at DFCU Bank, she crafted a pioneering ESG framework. She also volunteers with Being Beyond Better, where she offers legal and ESG consultancy services, showcasing her dedication to positive societal and environmental impact. Nina's reputation is built on her diligence, focus, reliability, and collaborative nature. Her vast knowledge in sustainability law and ESG risk management makes her an advocate for ethical business practices, shaping a more responsible future. So, Nina, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Abbas there. What are your thoughts about that video that I played earlier? And what's, not just your thoughts, but what do you think the sense is in African countries?
So I admire her passion and empathy for her people. It's really evident in her heartfelt words. And yet, I believe her sentiments on the topic are very misplaced. So the issue here is that climate change has affected everyone, like Abbas said, whether you contributed to the emissions or not, and it doesn't matter what your geographic location is. So now we can consider the advantages of renewable energy. It is sustainable, it's efficient, and it emits fewer harmful substances. And the only downside to it is that it's costly to set up. So the crux of the matter for me lies in the financial aspect, that our transition to cleaner energy demands that we invest greatly in renewable energy. Now, if we look at just statistics, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change asserts that energy sector emits the largest greenhouse gases. And so if we need to make any impact, we should enhance our ability to access renewable energy. And also the International Energy Agency asserts that we need to invest up to 1.3 trillion annually by 2030 if we are to achieve our climate goals. That means that we need to maintain below climate change below 1.5 degrees C. And so for me, the question of whether we're going to get renewable energy or not doesn't come up. Just need to understand that all this needs financing. And so we need to invest more in renewable energies. We need to have more private investments in renewable energy. And also we need to realize that the sooner we start on it, the better. So a concerted effort, not leaving this for the public to only invest in, but also for the private persons to come in, will lead us to better climate change.
Okay, thank you for that, Nina. So Nina will be back in a few minutes. Also on the show today, we have Sunday Ojo. How are you today, Sunday?
Yeah, I'm good, Mike. Hello, everyone.
Good. So Sunday Ojo is a certified ESG and sustainability professional with over 5 years cross-sectorial experience in the development, implementation, and monitoring of sustainability and ESG initiatives and strategies. As a consultant, he is engaged with a diverse array of organizations and corporations spanning various sectors, providing sustainability and ESG solutions that align with organizational requirements, while adhering to a range of sustainability development frameworks, as well as local and international regulations and global best practices. Additionally, he has led and managed various ESG requirements and engagements with investors, leaders, development partners, and impact funds such as World Bank, IFC, AFTP, USDFC, and AFREXIM, amongst others. Glad to have you on the show today, Sunday. So, Sunday, I had a conversation with you a few days ago, which we recorded. And I think if you're happy with that, in a few minutes, we'll run that recording. Are you okay with that, Sunday?
Yeah, no problems.
Of course, but please join us in the conversations that are about to follow as well. So please stay with us. And now we're going to have take a look at some recent editorial in newspapers and magazines, and or just reports from various organisations. And we start with one from you, Nina, from the US Embassy in Uganda. The US Embassy in Uganda issued an investment report about Uganda, where they stated that the investments made in Uganda could be sound if there wasn't corruption. So, Nina, what are your thoughts about this report?
Thank you, Michael. So in this report, what struck me the most were the parts that delve into the legal framework and the issue of corruption in Uganda. It is worth noting, first of all, that Ugandan businesses are not permitted to reveal, they are not required to reveal their ESG profiles. So American companies in Uganda consistently highlight corruption as an obstacle to doing business in Uganda. Corruption is especially in government procurement processes, and this poses a great challenge because when they want to bid on Uganda's government contracts, they find a challenge with corruption. So procurement, first of all, plays a great role in ESG risk management due to the fact that we have to consider our production value chain right from upstream and downstream to the products that we deliver. So if the persons who are actually delivering a good or a service are corrupt, that affects ESG policies and standards greatly. So corruption actually is a signal of a lack of consideration of ESG policies and standards. And so on the whole, it creates an uneven playing field, because you have businesses that come from highly regulated jurisdictions. These jurisdictions have established codes of conduct to facilitate ESG management and policies and standards, and they are competing with companies which do not have the same standards or the same requirements. And it's important to note that ESG enforcement also requires that money is spent on any ESG causes. And so if it becomes a cost to the company that is actively engaging in ESG policies and standards, then it becomes unfair for them to compete. And so it creates like an unleveled playing field.
Okay, thank you for that, Nina. Now, apologies to people that I'm got something in my mouth right now. I've got a cough, a nasty cough that won't go away, and I think you would prefer that I be chewing a cough sweet and not coughing than having from chewing nothing and coughing. So apologies about that. There was also a story which I spotted from the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative, and it states Nigerian financial institutions began their journey promoting a sustainable economy through sustainable banking almost a decade ago. There was a collaboration between the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Bankers Committee to establish a sustainable banking framework that will drive innovation, market resilience, and sustainable economy. The result of this collaboration was the establishment of the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles in 2012. The Nigerian financial regulators shown vision and leadership. So this is a quote. The Nigerian financial regulators have shown vision and leadership by becoming one of the first examples in the world where all financial regulators in a country have come together to discuss their role in sustainable development, said Yuki Yasu, deputy head of UNEP Financial Initiatives. Abbas, have you got any thoughts on this report?
Yes, thank you, Michael. I think the report states something very important. The very impressive step that the Nigeria's Bankers Committee and the Central Bank of Nigeria took, some almost a decade ago, in charting the course for sustainable finance within the country. This led to the development and the adoption of the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles. There are 9 principles across different aspects of sustainable finance, and these principles has sort of put financial institutions on spot to ensure that they integrate environment, social, and governance criteria in their investing and financing activities. So over the years, the Central Bank of Nigeria has monitored the implementation of the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles. Principle 1 requires that financial institutions, particularly banks, conduct environmental and social risk management of their portfolio. They should also, Principle 2 talks about, covering their own footprint themselves. So you've seen banks now conduct, due diligence on transactions. In terms of managing their own footprint, banks are now using renewables to power their automated teller machines outlet and to cut down on their emissions, right? So you will see that, in fact, some banks have actually, based on the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, looking at, pushing financial inclusion for women and other, underserved demographics. You've seen banks, creating new products to serve women. You've seen banks also, creating new product to fund renewables. So that as Nigeria looks to undertake its journey to the net zero agenda. You see banks also now taking lead in funding renewable energy projects as private sector opportunities. So you would see that the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principle has helped create an atmosphere where financial institutions are also taking leading role in championing sustainable development in the country. Of course, there are still a lot of opportunities to improve, but it's definitely exciting to see that business as usual has been jettisoned. Now, a new approach of sustainable development involving applying ESG criteria in their operations as well as in their business activities is on the mainstream.
Okay, thank you for that. Sunday, anything to add to those comments?
Okay, so just a little addition to what Abba just said. The sustainable banking principles just state that banks and the financial institutions, they should not just focus on the finances. There are some other aspects, especially the environmental and social aspect, that needs to be incorporated into their day-to-day activities. And I will also, in addition to the few principles he has mentioned, the principle 6 of that particular sustainable banking principle states talks about the environmental and social governance. That is, banks should not just look into their own internal activities. The social and environmental risk assessment also extends to the client. Like if they want to borrow, if they want to lend money out to different organizations, the principle also states that they should also look into the environmental and social risk of the people or of the organization or the corporation that they want to lend money to. So it's actually a good effort towards achieving a sustainable environment.
Okay, thank you for that. So Sunday, we're going to be running out, recording that video I did with you shortly. I think what I'll do now is I'll have a brief chat with you, Abbas, if that's okay. And I wonder if you could talk about the landscape of ESG data in Africa, and is the continent ready for ESG ratings, do you think?
Well, I think the continent is somewhat ready. Of course, data remains a challenge on the continent, but we have seen some very impressive improvement in the last 5 to 10 years because now ESG is more mainstream and you have a lot more institutions adopting ESG framework, applying ESG principles and standards in their operations. Prior to this time, the main focus is only the HSE, health, safety and environment, but a more broader notion of ESG, particularly within the financial space, is really kickstarting. And I think this is particularly influenced by the flow of money. I think the idea is follow the money. When financial institutions who are signatories to global initiatives such as the United Nations principles, or principles for sustainable insurance, or principles for sustainable banking, all of these institutions, because they now lend money to private sector on the continent, and part of their requirement is for private sector to meet, provide certain data to them on a regular basis. Because of this, we now have more companies being intentional in, capturing environmental related data, social related data, governance data. So we've seen some improvement, and you would see, I think some of the most prominent one would be in South Africa, and the likes of Kenya, the likes of Ghana, Nigeria, and West Africa, and of course up north there in Morocco, Egypt. Generally, you would notice that a few institutions in rating agencies are now including ESG rating as part of the broader credit rating assessment that they do for entities. We can only hope that this will improve over time as more and more data come on. But generally, I do think that we can't wait forever. We should be ready to take on as more institutions are getting into the practice of collecting data and reporting. But there's still a lot of improvement, nevertheless.
Okay, thank you for that. So, I mean, whenever I talk to people, African people especially, about the opportunity for Africa because of a lot of sun, a lot of wind, etc., like I talked about earlier, people say, yeah, that's all very well, Michael, but this stuff costs money. Is Africa getting enough climate finance to achieve net zero commitments, do you think?
So I would speak from the report, the Climate Policy Initiative report of 2021, looks at the climate finance landscape across sub-Saharan Africa. I think generally the trend that you see is that not enough capital climate finance is flowing into Africa. And part of one key, observation is also that there is a lot of finance skewed towards mitigation project more than adaptation project. So I do think that it's part of why some people within the continent keep pushing the narrative that the West or the developed economies are not going to hinder Africa's growth, because the contention is, if we want Africa to transition, then we need to provide the finance. And for every country's nationally determined contribution, if you take Nigeria, for example, there are two sets of scenarios where one is conditional upon, climate finance from international community, and the other is unconditional. So you have about 45% conditional, 47% conditional, 45% unconditional. This is to sort of state that if at least we need up to $100 billion annually, to be spent on climate related interventions, both for mitigation and adaptation. But what is coming in now is quite lower than this sum. I think in the last 5 years, not even up to, if you say you need $100 billion annually, but even what has come in the last 5 years is not even up to $100 billion. It tells us how far behind we are. And so this means that we may not be cutting down emissions or even adapting for resilience at the pace that is necessary. That presents a challenge, really.
Okay, fine. All right. Now I just want to turn to the thorny topic of extractive industries. In resource-rich countries such as Guinea and DRC, is ESG oversight for extractive industries sufficient, do you think?
Well, I would say that it's improving, but it's not sufficient, because when you review statistics around human rights abuse, forced labor, child labor, particularly, across these countries, you would see that not much has really improved because of the widespread poverty and very acute economic conditions. And despite the fact that some of the fanciest phones, laptops, gadgets are produced from the critical minerals that are extracted from these mines in these countries, you would expect that these people should have seen a very significant improvement in the well-being. But this is not the case, as you have a lot of out-of-school children, a lot of women working in these mines. You have a very serious public health records because of exposures to terrible conditions across the mines. So there is a lot that still needs to be done, across this in the mines in these various countries. So the interesting thing is nowadays, where you have a lot of DFIs, involved in financing some of these extractive industries, we tend to see. So generally, DFIs actually shy away. DFIs generally shy away from financing, this, because of the very critical issues that come up there. But there are some who do not mind. A few ones who believe that having a skin in the game is how they can make improvement. But generally, I find most DFIs not, wanting to be part because of the issues around, resettlement, compensation, and other issues like this. But there's still a lot that needs to be done, because you have some private equity, players in the space, but there's need to balance the financial incentive alongside the environmental and social outcomes associated with operations within, this sector. But overall, I think there is, gradual improvement in the overall state of things, and we can only expect that as we are more intentional in embedding ESG consideration in the operations of the extractive companies, we would see some significant change over the course of time. And I mean, related, the climate change also is an issue, because when you have water stress, it could easily, shut down the operation of these mines, because they rely a lot on water. But it could also lead to a lot of, social issues, because the competition between scarce resources with the people and the mine. So a lot of issues are still, a hub for debate and action. And I do hope that, this will improve over time.
Thank you very much for that, Abbas. Now, Abbas, can you join us again in a few minutes when we'll have some more questions for you? We are running short of time, as ever. I'm just going to be joined now for Nina, whom I'm going to talk to for 3 or 4 minutes. Nina, hi, hello again.
Hi.
Nina, so financial institutions model for ESG. Why do we need this? The need for more climate change finance and sustainable investment instead of sanctions and regulations. So climate change finance and sustainable investment instead of sanctions and regulations. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, so financial institutions, first, they are highly regulated. And so they have a model for ESG, which is about integrating environmental, social, and governance factors in every facet of their operations. From risk assessment to investment strategies, they actively engage with stakeholders to champion responsible and sustainable financial practices. And so for most financial institutions, ESG goes beyond mere lip service. It involves substantial investments, particularly in environmental and social causes. And so in Africa, where we need financial support for social development, it is important to have a partner like that. And so such investments influence how communities respond to even the catastrophes which may be occasioned by climate change. And in our environments, financial institutions have been pioneers in corporate social investment. And so this should be something which is embraced by all. We have seen that sanctions and regulations often fall short of driving significant ESG change. And so the goal is not to just make people get laws and regulations about ESG, but to inspire genuine care about creating better societies where people operate and or where the companies, different companies operate. And so this ESG model is actually a positive, it's a powerful force for positive change.
Okay.
It's a call to action. Yes.
Okay, thanks for that, Nina. The other day, you and we had a conversation about something, and I wanted to ask you about that. Unilever has a sustainable living plan, which showcases their dedication to sustainable sourcing and reduction of environmental impact. So far, so good. However, earlier this year, the BBC did a documentary about their abuse of human rights on Unilever and Lipton tea farms in Kenya. Is there an increased risk of manipulation of ESG reports by companies, do you think?
Yes. So first, we need to establish that is greenwashing, which is a practice where sustainability-related statements, declarations, actions, and communications do not clearly or fairly reflect the underlying sustainability profile of an entity, in this case, Unilever. So they have a sustainable living plan where they highlight their commitment to sustainable sourcing and reducing environmental impact. But then, on the other hand, we have the people who are working on their funds being abused. And what's troubling is that for these reports of abuse, they had been persistent for years. Most of the perpetrators had been working in those companies for over 20 years. And so while many companies genuinely strive for sustainability, there's a risk of ESG reports being manipulated or greenwashed to present a more positive image while ignoring the critical issues. So this can actually, this attracts, it's an attempt really to just look acceptable in front of consumers and investors. And so the Unilever case really highlights the need for greater scrutiny and accountability in ESG reporting. We should also have independent verification and third-party audits and transparent disclosure mechanisms to help ensure that sustainability claims align with the actual practices.
Okay, thank you for that. I just got one more quick question for you, and then we've got to move on. But I mean, I guess this is a good. When things like this happen, it does create cynicism, and this is why people like Maguette Wade make the comments that they do have, because we get this greenwashing, and it just adds ammunition to those who are very cynical about this.
Yeah, so ESG reporting plays a pivotal role in promoting sustainability. And it is important that we hold every company accountable for the statistics and reports that they make, so that we can prevent manipulation and ensure that companies are genuinely committed to responsible business practices. And just to emphasize, we must prioritize transparency in reporting and employ independent verification processes, and also ensure people in these companies are held accountable for the reports that they are making. So if we have proper measures in place to ensure that the reports that we are making about sustainability are accurate, then we can reduce the counterproductive effects of companies like Unilever claiming that they have a sustainable living plan, and yet they are also at the same time mistreating their workers.
Okay, thank you for that, Nina. Thank you. We're going to now run the interview I ran with Sunday a couple of days ago. And then when we've done that, we'll have about 3 minutes back just to look at questions from the audience and to sum up. So with a bit of luck, the recording is going to be running any second now. So bear with us whilst it comes up. There's a view that I've heard many times that in the developed world, we got rich through burning fossil fuels. And now we're turning around, and now that Africa and other regions of the world are developing and emerging very rapidly, we're saying to them, oh, no, you can't burn fossil fuels. So they accuse us of being a little bit, us in the West, in the developed world, as being a little bit imperialistic. What are your thoughts about that? And not in just your thoughts, but what are your how do you feel Africans in general feel about that?
Okay, basically, Africa as a continent, I can say most of the people have come to realize the effect or the impact of burning fossil fuel. Of course, the evidences are all around. We have flooding that is occurring in different countries. We have desertification that is occurring in different countries. So we also have some level of air pollution that is affecting people up, and that we have a lot of lung diseases. So we cannot run away from the fact. I can say people that are still believing that we can continue to burn fossil fuel. They don't have the right awareness about the impact of fossil fuel. So, but basically, generally, I think African continent, we are aware of the impact of fossil fuel, and then we cannot discard the negative effect that the burning is bringing. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, so what progress has been made in Africa so far to promote transparency and ethical business practices, and what hurdles do you still think need to be overcome?
Okay, so basically, a lot of African countries have been adopting different frameworks, different standards that ensures that there's ethical businesses, and the businesses are sustainable. We have a lot of standards. For instance, in Nigeria, we have the Nigeria Sustainable Banking Principles that guides the activities of for banking sectors. We also have some also at the national level, the exchange group of the country. It ensures that the people that are listed in the group, they have a sustainable or ESG report that is being submitted. Of course, those are the different things that are being done to ensure that there is ethical business principles in the country. And apart from Nigeria, I know of some other countries, South Africa, Ghana, Kenya. I know that they also have their own laws. They also have there's frameworks that ensure there's ethical business all around Africa.
Okay, thanks for that. And how do you think, in terms of compliance and alignment with these international standards, or with international standards, not just these, but broader international standards. How are African countries faring, do you think?
Yeah, yes. A lot of African countries, they have been aligning with different standards and framework. We have a lot of businesses across Africa when they want to report their ESG and sustainability report, they align with GRI. A lot of also, for instance, Nigeria as a country, we signed different agreements during the COP27 that held in Egypt, and also the Nigeria Exchange Group also have adopted GRI as one of the standards that they use for different reporting. So I can see that a lot of African countries they are doing well, though we have not gotten there yet as a continent, but I know that we have progressed.
Okay, thanks for that. So and what about African governments? What roles can African governments do you think, to enhance support for ESG and create and enable an environment for sustainable development?
Okay, so of course, the government as the highest governing body of different countries, they have a lot of roles to play. The first one is the awareness. They have to create awareness about what ESG sustainability is all about. We have a lot of people that don't know what it is all about. We have a lot of people that are still.
There's a view that I've heard many times that in the developed world, we got rid. That ended rather abruptly. Apologies for that, but I'm now going to bring everybody back on stage. We've got some questions from the audience that I'd like to quickly deal with. Faliat Ololakan says, Abbas, the need for transition speed. Nina, need for finance. Sunday, need to evaluate environmental and social performance. I suppose it's a summary, really. Is that a good summary, do you think?
Yes, I do think that that's a good summary. It tells us that we need to take action. Of course, we can continue to have conversations. We can continue to have conference of parties every year. But what is far more important is how we measure the actions, that we have taken so far for us to guide the realization of the outcomes of the target that we have set for ourselves. So it's important that we really move fast on mobilizing the needed financing to put in place the necessary mitigation effort and adaptation initiatives for all countries.
Okay, so Peter Marimi says it shows and highlights knowledge in the areas of climate change. The need and the dynamics of decarbonisation, and why we need it, is unfortunate, but even executives in big companies are struggling to understand climate change and the need for climate disclosures for their organisations and the need for decarbonisation. There's a need for accelerated ESG support and consultancy in Africa and developing regions and society at large. And Shankar Yadav says, how far and effective are we to date? How effective is things being to date, do you think, Nina?
So first I must emphasize all we need is finance our initiatives for green energy, and also to educate people about their needs. But also, if you're looking at the businesses which can even afford to have ESG standards and policies in place, and also to do some corporate social investment, all these things require money. And also, this also calls into the question of the abuse which is caused by corruption. And so we need to make sure that our progress first to this date is examined, to make sure that every action that we are doing that contributes to ESG, we report it in terms of how it has created impact and measurement, so that we can show how useful it is for our investors to then bring in more money. So our efforts so far are really about investments which are not accurately measured, and so we cannot fully convince investors that we have contributed a lot to this change. And so if we can measure our performance, that brings us to more finance, and that makes us more effective in ESG.
Okay, thank you for that. Sunday, do you have anything to add to that those comments?
Okay, so I'd just like to add that sustainability and achieving ESG is not just about reporting. You know, a lot of companies, they are all after reporting so that they can get good ratings from different rating agencies. So it's not all about reporting. After reporting, what are you still doing to make sure that your business is sustainable? So that's just my contribution.
Okay, thank you for that. We're pretty much out of time. I think that I'm going to be a bit quick, and I'm going to each give you 30 seconds. 30 seconds. So, what do you think are the key points regarding ESG and Africa? 30 seconds to sum up. Abbas, are you up for having a go at that?
Yeah, I do think that generally people view ESG just as a risk mitigation tool, but importantly, it needs to be viewed as providing dual opportunities of value creation alongside risk mitigation. If we see it from this end, we would always think about how ESG would affect the bottom line or the top line more than just seeing it as a cost center. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Nina, your turn.
For me, ESG and sustainability is a question of justice. And to be fair is to reach out to your neighbors, but to also make considerations for yourself and for the future. And so in whatever we do, we need to ensure that we contribute to the sustainability, we make considerations for those around us, those who we do not know, and also those in the future.
Okay, thank you. And Sunday, you can finish off.
Okay, so I'd just like to say we should not see ESG and sustainability as just a practice. If you can just have the sustainable mindset, you can set our minds towards sustainability in our day-to-day activities, in our even when we want to switch on our light, our mindset should switch towards sustainability. So I think with everyone having a sustainable mindset, the world will be a better place to live.
Thank you very much, everybody. Abbas, Nina, Sunday, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody, for watching the show today. We had a lot of people signing up to watch this particular show. I think it was our highest numbers to date. Look forward to seeing you all next week when we'll be talking about ESG and leadership. I've got some fantastic guests lined up for you. I think it's the same time next week. See you then. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.